The third and final formula that you will need to know for linear equations is something called standard form. You've already seen equations in this format, but you haven't known that that's what you were doing. So the first thing we want to go over, just like normal, is to take on the formula. The standard form formula has some rules attached to it as well. All right, so the formula itself is capital A, little x, plus capital B, little y, equals capital C. The A, the B, and the C must be capitalized, and the x and the y must be lowercase. The rules surrounding this, there are 3 of them that must occur and must exist for your equation to be written correctly. A and B cannot both be 0 at the same time. One of them can be 0 or not at all, and the other one can, right? But both cannot not exist at the same time, because then you don't have anything left in your equation, right? And that's not a possible thing to do. The second rule that has to occur, and many of you will like this one, your final answer may have no fractions or decimals in it. Now, that doesn't mean that your work won't have fractions or decimals, but your final answer can have no fractions or decimals allowed in the answer. And another way that you'll see this phrase is they will say that it has to have only integer coefficients, which, if you remember, integers are your positive and negative numbers on a number line. They're not allowed to be fractions or decimals either, so it makes sense, right? But in the directions, it'll literally say those 2 words, integer coefficients. The third and final rule that must exist for an equation to be completely done in standard form is that the A value cannot be negative. So the A value has to be positive in every single case. So when all 3 of these rules have been followed and it's in the order of ax plus by equals c, then and only then can you say that your equation is in standard form. Okay? And standard form is one of those formulas that every equation can be converted to. Just like slope-intercept form, we can convert every equation into that one as well. Right? So now the next thing we want to take a look at are some examples. And I've got 6 different examples that are going to take you through a variety of levels from easy to hard, and we're going to see if we can make it happen in the right format. All right? I'm going to put the original equation on the left, and then we'll play around with it on the right hand side. So the first equation we're going to use is y equals 2/3 x minus 5. So that equation is already in intercept form, but we've got to convert it to standard form. So you start with the original equation, right? And you've got a few things that you need to do. First of all, it's not in the correct order. The x and the y are not on the left hand side. And second of all, it's got a fraction in it. So my advice to you is, first and foremost, whenever possible, get rid of the fraction and make it go away from the beginning. So we do that by multiplying both sides by 3. After doing this, you're left with 3y equals, the 3 times 2/3 crosses the 3 off the bottom. You have 2x minus 15. So the fraction part has been taken care of. The next thing we want to do is move the x over so that it's in front of the y on the left-hand side. So we subtract 2x, and we want to write it so that it's going to be in front of the y. Otherwise, the order of our standard form formula is not going to come out. So we have negative 2x plus 3y equals negative 15. And while the order is good, you're still breaking one of the rules, and that's the fact that the a value, which is the negative 2, cannot be negative. So in order to make this happen, we need to get rid of the negative sign. And we can do that very easily by dividing everybody by negative 1. Right? And once we do that, we end up with positive 2x minus 3y equals positive 15. This is your final answer in standard form. All 3 rules have been applied, and it's breaking none of them, right? So sometimes it takes a little bit more work depending on the problem and the way it starts off. Right? So take a look at a second one. And again, this one will also be in intercept form to start with. If I have y equals negative 5 over 2x plus 6 over 5. Okay, once again, we're going to start with the original equation. Okay, and the first piece of advice I can always give you is to get rid of those fractions, because you know you can't have them in your answer anyway, so you might as well just get rid of them from the beginning. In order to get rid of a 2 and a 5 on the bottom, we have to multiply by a common denominator. For 2 and 5, the common denominator is 10. Right, so hopefully you remember how to do this from our earlier times with equations that had fractions in them. 10 times y is 10y. you have to ask yourself, how many times does 2 go into 10? So we slash off the 2. 2 goes into 10 5 times, so that means we multiply the top by 5. Negative 5 times 5 is going to give us negative 25x. Then we go to the next fraction, and you ask yourself, how do you get from 5 to 10? Slash off the 5, and there's 2 groups of 5 in 10, so we multiply the top by 2. And 6 times 2 is going to give you plus 12. So after multiplying by 10, here's what you're left with. The next thing we want to do is move things around so that the order comes out looking like standard form is supposed to. The x has got to be on the left in front of the y, so we've got to move him over. We do that by adding 25x to both sides and rewriting the equation. So now we have 25x plus 10y equals 12. Right? There's no fractions or decimals. My a is not negative, and both a and b are not 0. So since I've satisfied all 3 rules, this is my final equation right here. Right, for the next one, you're not always given something in slope-intercept form to start with. Sometimes you're given other information. So this time I'm giving you a point and the value of m, or the slope. Right? Because you know the slope and you have a point to go through, you can do point slope form and get into standard form as well. Right? So for this one, I would put a reminder over here that you can put it in point slope form first. So you have to remember that formula and then use that formula to convert it to standard form. Right? So if you remember, point slope form was y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So I want to fill in that with my pieces from my ordered pair. Right? So doing so, that gives me y minus 4 equals negative 4 parentheses x plus 3, because your 2 negatives will turn positive. So from that equation, I want to convert it to standard form. You do have to distribute at this point to keep going. So y minus 4 equals negative 4x minus 12. You'll actually find that when you go through point slope form and start with point slope form, you'll go through slope intercept form before you hit standard form. It's just the way that the problem sets itself up. So you're doing all 3 forms in the same problem, right? Which is not uncommon. Right? At this point, I want to move the 4 over, so I'm going to add 4 to the other side because my constant needs to be on the right-hand side. I've got y equals negative 4x minus 8. And if they had said put this in slope-intercept form, I'd be done. But that's not what they told us to do. You have to put it in standard form. So now the x needs to go back over to the left, and we do that by adding it to the other side. And now we're sitting at 4x plus y equals negative 8. Double check and make sure, do you have any fractions or decimals? No. Are a and b both 0? No. Is the value of a negative? No. So since you said no to all 3 of those rules, this is your final answer in standard form. But notice we started at point slope, right? And then we went to intercept, and then we went to standard, right? So that's one of the unique equations that you can do that to. And you can do that pretty much with almost any equation as long as you have point slope to start with. All right, so let's take on another one and practice doing the same thing. I'm still giving you a point and a slope because I want you to get familiar and comfortable with doing all 3 formulas in the same problem. Right? This is why the formulas are so important for you to know. It's because you have to be able to fluctuate between all 3 of them at the right times. Okay, so now I'm giving you the order pair negative 5, negative 6, and the slope is 3. So go into point slope form and fill in your pieces. All right, it'll be y minus y1, which really turns into y plus 6, equals slope is 3, parentheses, and then x minus negative 5, which really turns into x plus 5. I'm doing the double signs in my head. If you need to physically write that step out and then get to this part, please do so. All right? But you should get fast enough and realize what's happening. When you stick a negative in behind a minus sign, it automatically turns positive. So I would think that many of you wouldn't have to deal with that. All right, so now at this point, I want to get to standard form, so I need to distribute. Y plus 6 equals 3x plus 15. Okay, move the 6 over by subtracting 6. So now I'm at y equals 3x plus 9. That's intercept form. I need standard form. So now I'm going to have to subtract the 3x over to the left, okay, because it does have to go on the left. You can't really write it any other way. Can't write it backwards. So you have negative 3x plus y equals 9. One of the rules is that you can't have a negative in your A spot, so we have to get rid of this negative attached to the 3. And we do that just by dividing everybody by negative 1. And what it does is changes all the signs to the opposite of what they are. So this will be positive 3x minus y equals negative 9. You have no fractions or decimals. Your A value is positive now, and both A and B are not 0. So this is your final standard form equation. Okay, so it does take a lot more work, but it's just basically about moving things around and making it get into the right format from what you started with. Right? And just like in point slope form and all the other formulas, anytime you are given two ordered pairs, you will have the most work to do, because not only do you have to go from one format to another, but you're going to have to find the slope first. Right? You cannot get into point slope or slope intercept form without the slope. Right? So this has to be your first move. First move, find slope. Okay. Then after that, you can decide whether you want to find the b to put it in slope intercept form, or if you want to go through point slope form. That's your choice, right? And then from there, you'll convert it to standard form. All right, so let's go ahead and find the slope first. The slope formula would give me 7 minus 4 on the top and 5 minus 1 on the bottom. 7 minus 4 is 3. 5 minus 1 is 4. So my slope for this problem is 3/4. Now, I like to use point slope form, but that's just my personal way. Many of you might like using slope intercept form, where you find the b and then you write your equation. It's literally up to you. There is no wrong way to do this, but there can be wrong answers. So make sure your answer, no matter how you approach the problem, comes out to be the same. I'm going to pick any ordered pair and do point slope form. So I'm going to choose the 1, 4. So that'll give me y minus 4 equals 3/4 times x minus 1. Okay? And then I'm going to go from there. I do have to distribute, so I get y minus 4 equals 3/4 x minus 3/4. Even if there are fractions, you still have to distribute the fraction first, and then you can get rid of them. So at this point, I'm not going to move the 4 over, because I know I can't have fractions in my final answer, so I'm going to get rid of them now. And the way I get rid of them is by multiplying the entire equation by that same denominator of 4. Okay, but make sure every single piece of this problem gets multiplied by 4, or it's not going to work. So 4 times y is 4y. 4 times negative 4 is negative 16, equals 3/4, the 4 crosses off, you're left with 3x, and then negative 3/4, the 4 crosses off, you're left with minus 3. Fractions are gone, so now you do not have to worry about that. Now your trick is to move things around to get it in ax plus by equals c format. So I'm going to move the 16 first. And now I've got 4y equals 3x plus 13. And then I'm going to move the x over to the left. So I'm going to subtract 3x so that it's in front of the y. So now I've got negative 3x plus 4y equals 13. And I'm almost there. It's in the right order. I have no fractions or decimals, but my a value is negative. So the last thing I need to do is divide everybody by negative 1 so I can take care of that rule that it's breaking. You're going to get 3x minus 4y equals negative 13. And this will end up being your final answer to those two ordered pairs that you started with. So once again, when you start with two ordered pairs, you do have the most work involved. But you have to make sure that you're going step by step and process by process in order to get to that final answer. Your formulas have to be used correctly and in the right place to come out with the right answer. All right, the sixth and final question, right, is not too bad. Right? It's really more or less showing you what to do when decimals are involved, because there are equations out there that look like this and they have decimals in them. Right? Normally you're not allowed to give decimals, but if the decimal already starts in the equation, you have to know what to do with it. Right? So if I look at this equation and you notice the order of it, it's already in ax plus by equals c order. There's nothing wrong with that part. What is wrong with it is the fact that you have decimals and you're not allowed to. No fractions or decimals can be in your answer. So the only thing I need to do to this problem is find a way to get rid of the decimals. And it's as easy as doing this. Find your place value. The 1 right here is in the 10th place. The 4 is in the 10th place. The 9 is in the 100th place. You always want to take the largest number of your place value. So 100th is my largest place value number. So in order to make all my decimals go away, I want to multiply the entire problem by 100. Okay? If you take 1.1 times 100, you will get 110x. If you take negative 0.4 times 100, you will get negative 40y. If you take 0.39 times 100, you will get 39. Notice that all of my decimals have gone away. If you choose 10, for the 10th place, you will still have a decimal over on the 39 side. It'll be 3.9, and that's not good enough. You want to make sure you pick the largest place value you can to get rid of all decimals, not just one side and not the other. So now if I look at it, my A value is positive, the A and B are not 0, there's no fractions or decimals. This is my final answer, right? And that's what I need it to be. So we'll do a lot more practicing with this in class, okay? And we'll see how comfortable you guys get with it.